What if I told you that there was a way to set up all of your technicians for success on every single ticket? What if this same process set all of your clients up for success as well? Well, today we're talking about triage and dispatch because that is a really critical process for your business to master. Back when I was still an engineer, I joined an MSP. They had me spend some time in triage and dispatch. It was part of our training. I found a couple things out. First thing is, I'm not very good at triage and dispatch. It's not a role that I would excel in. And two, it's a lot harder than you think it would be because there's a lot to juggle and there's a lot of personalities to deal with, and it's a difficult job. So if you need to do it, you might as well do it well. Let's talk about that on today's ramble. The triage and dispatch process is critical for every MSP to get dialed in. And note that I've said process so far and not know so much a person. Of course, at some point you'll want a full-time triage and dispatch person, but when you are a very small MSP, you don't need one right away. It's important to get this process dialed in and know that it's going to evolve over time. The triage and dispatch process sets up your engineers for success. The goal of the whole process is to make sure that everybody knows what the issue is, how urgent it is, and who should be working on it, right? That's the whole point of this process. So that's what we're talking about today. So you hear me use the words triage and dispatch a lot, and you're gonna hear them a lot in this ramble. So what exactly is triage and what exactly is dispatch? Triage really is all about getting your ticket set up for success. That's understanding what goes in the ticket, what's going on, what the urgency is, what are the systems involved, those kinds of things, right? That's what triage is all about. It's all about understanding what the problem is. If you think about if you ever had to go to an ER, right? The intake nurse or the intake doctor, whomever is doing that new patient intake, asks you, what's going on, where does it hurt, how bad is it hurt, those kinds of things, right? And they want to understand who's injured and impacted by something versus who might die, right? That's the whole idea. Triage in a big regard is a lot about that in your MSP, is trying to understand how big the issue is and who needs to work on the issue. Then you flip over to dispatch, right? Dispatch is all about trying to make sure that the right person works on the right issue at the right time. You take that triage, you triage the ticket, and you figure out who the right resource is, who should be working on it, and then you hand it off to them, right? That's that part of it, right? And I think it's important to understand that this is like two sides of the same coin of a process. So when you triage tickets that are coming in, you actually want to triage all of them that are there. It took me a long time as a service manager to understand that you need to triage everything first before you dispatch that first ticket, right? Because if you triage a ticket, dispatch a ticket, triage a ticket, dispatch a ticket, you're going to end up dispatching a ticket that's not as important or not as urgent and overlapping a bigger issue, right? If you think back to the ER example, if that was all they did, they triaged a person, then they put them in a room and triaged a person, put them in a room and triaged a person, put them in a room. The person that would come, after all the rooms fill up would invariably be someone who might die, and they'd have to pull somebody out of a room and try to reorganize all those things. And so that's why this triage and dispatch process here is so important, is you try to understand all of the pile of tickets, everything that's in this pile of ticket, and you parcel out the different individual pieces in a fashion that makes the most sense. You want to make sure that the urgent stuff gets worked first and the less urgent stuff gets worked second, third, or fourth, depending on what's going on. So that's the whole point of the dispatch process. If you think about your overall life of a ticket process, this triage and dispatch is like the first, couple steps of that process. It's really important to do well, because when it's done well, your clients feel it. And when it's not done well, your clients really feel it. So it's important to get this process dialed in as quickly as you can, and then you evolve it as you need to as your company grows. It's also important to understand there's a number of different types of triage and dispatch. Typically what happens is that you have a very small MSP, a solo owner or an owner plus a tech or two, and you typically at that point, you're small enough where you can kind of just pick up whatever's next on the list, because you very rarely have multiple major urgent issues at the same time. Now, of course you do from here to there, but you can kind of figure it out a little bit as you go. But this is very much a self-dispatch model where you kind of look at the tickets in the list and you say, okay, this one's the next most important one. You pick it off the list and you just kind of roll with it. Over time, and as your company grows, things like cherry picking become an issue. A tech will say, don't want to work that issue. I'm going to work the one underneath it because that one looks like a whole lot more fun. It's the thing I like better, or I don't like the person that created the top ticket. Those are things that I've seen often in that regard. So you want to make sure that you're using this triage and dispatch process to eliminate that cherry picking as much as possible. Understand that this self-dispatch model doesn't work forever. So the next set of triage that typically happens is a tech takes over triage. And a tech can do triage just fine. Technicians are good at those kinds of things. But here's what I've seen in this regard. A technician that does triage is typically a tech that wants to do other things. And when this tech wants to do other things, triage is never really like the most important part of the job, right? It's just part of the job that they do because you told them to do it. And they're going to do it as well as they need to, but it's not a thing that they probably love. And so that they're always kind of working on kind of whatever the next thing is, that whatever is going to move their career forward or be more fun and those kinds of things, right? So a technician can absolutely do the triage job like I had to when I was working at that MSP, where I had to learn it. And I wasn't particularly good at it, candidly, but I learned the process. But I also quickly learned that I did not want to do that process long term because I did not have the skill set or the temperament to do that work. The other part with a tech doing triage is that technicians want to solve problems and they want to like take an issue all the way through to completion. That's a very hard thing to do for a technician to say, I just want you to understand what the issue is, hand it off. Understand what the issue is, hand it off. Understand what the issue is and hand it off. That's a tough thing for most technical people to do for a long time because they never get that satisfaction of completing the issue. And so it's really important that if you're going to have a tech doing triage, that they have some opportunity to solve problems as well. The other issue with a tech doing triage is that it often creates this sort of revolving door effect where the tech kind of rolls in and out of triage and you never really have a consistent triage person because you put a tech in there, they roll off, and you put a different tech in there and they roll off, and you put a different tech in there and they roll off. And over time, this revolving door makes for a not terrific triage and dispatch process for your clients. I think it's important that you honor the idea that this triage process is critically important, and by having a revolving door makes it be automatically less important because there's not a whole lot of continuity in that role. So then that leads us to non-technical triage. That's kind of where I think most MSPs should end up. Now, not every MSP needs to be there. There's all kinds of reasons why, a technical person could do triage forever, and that's fine. My preference is to, at some point, shift into a non-technical person doing triage. You don't need somebody who understands all of the latest technology running your triage department. You need someone who's organized, who can talk to other human beings, and who can help prioritize and just keep things moving forward. That's the skill set of a triage person. It's more about the people skills and the organization than it is having anything to understand about technical stuff, because you can teach somebody how to do the technical pieces of the triage stuff. You can teach them the questions to ask and the things to understand, and over time they'll get better at the technical pieces of it. But again, you don't really want this person being a tech anyway. What you really want is this triage person that can answer the calls, answer the tickets, answer the emails, whatever that looks like, and do that really well and be energized by that role. Keep with that continuity of care with your clients over time, because ultimately it sets your clients and your techs up for far more success than that revolving door of a technical triage person. When it comes to the triage and dispatch process, I think there's a few things worth dialing in as it relates to the process. One of the things I'd make sure to understand is to have some clear guidance around what a ticket looks like when it's done well, right? Does that mean you have a good description, have the contact information, have the machines tagged, all those types of things? Those are common things you probably want to have in there. The second piece of the process is prioritization. What does that look like for you and for your clients? It's important to have, something from the client would like a thing done to clients fully down, right? There's a continuum in there. Usually it's client would like a thing done, client is kind of irritated because something isn't working quite right, to client is unable to do part of all of their job, to things fully down, right? There's a continuum in there. Make sure that's well defined for you and for your clients. Make sure your clients understand what that continuum looks like, and of course, make sure that your triage dispatcher and all of your techs understand what that looks like as well. It's also important for your triage and dispatch person to understand who the right resources for the certain things are, right? That is who's the tech that deals with firewall issues, who's the tech that deals with passwords. So figure out what that looks like, because it's important that your triage person understands how to deal with those kinds of things. And so make sure that's documented well and part of your process. Just like any process in your organization, things will evolve and change over time. So make sure you leave some room for that as well. Another question that I hear a lot in the peer groups and other places is, where do I find this triage and dispatch person? Of course, you could hire another triage person from another MSP or some other technical spot. That's pretty obvious. But there's a few other places where I think are worth digging into or investigating. The first one is any HVAC, plumbing, electrical, anybody in the trades that does dispatching for other things is a pretty solid opportunity. Think taxi and car services. Another option would be EMT dispatcher. So those are all pretty common ones. There's one that I heard recently that I think has some merit, and that is someone who works with little kids, right? Think pre-K through second, third, fourth grade. Somebody who can manage that much chaos on every given day, build lesson plans, do all those things that have to happen, and kind of deal with all the personalities. That person's got some skills that could translate well into your MSP. Now, I'd like to think about it more in the idea that this person is good with handling all the chaos, but also it probably doesn't hurt to understand how to deal with temper tantrums, because users are sometimes prone to throwing temper tantrums themselves. So know that that is another option for you as well. So then let's talk career growth a little bit, because I think it's important that especially if you're going to hire a non-technical dispatch person, that they understand that they have a career path with you and your organization. First, I would absolutely pay a triage and dispatch person a little more than market if they're good, right? If they're really good at what they do and they're knocking it out of the park for you otherwise, I don't mind paying them, right? I think that's absolutely worth it. Having a good triage person sets the rest of the process up for success. That is worth some money, right? So consider that. Secondly, there is opportunity for things like becoming a team lead for part of your service department, or maybe being a team lead for other dispatchers, or doing things like project management and project coordination and those kinds of things, because those skills transfer over really well. And oftentimes once you've got the triage process well defined and they're doing this part really well, there's maybe some margin in there, and they could potentially help with some of the project pieces and help, dispatch and schedule project engineers and project tickets as well. I think there's a lot of symbiosis there. And of course, the ultimate career path might be a service manager, a really good triage and dispatcher that grows up over time, that wants to be in leadership and has leadership potential, can absolutely be a service manager. Your service managers don't need to be super technical. I was a fairly technical service manager, but I've had service managers who weren't that technical. Again, it's more important about being organized and being able to manage people and situations than it is to know how to do all the technical work. So those are some really solid career paths for your triage and dispatch folks. So we've covered today what triage and dispatch is, why it's important, how it impacts your business, how it impacts your clients, where to find them, career path, all of those things. I think that it should be clear by now that the triage and dispatch process is really important for your business. It's really important for the long-term success for your business and for your clients that work with you as well. So with all of that, hopefully you've learned something on today's ramble. Thanks for being here with me. Please click that like and subscribe, and I'll see you on the next one.